let's take a look at your far-flung acquisitions and your far-flung assets. You're in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And you're very domestic in Malaysia as a foreign bank.
Yeah, good for you, yeah.
How did that happen?
Oh, over a long period of time. We took our board, I remember taking our board to Malaysia. I was vice chairman of international, and that was got to be 1998 to Malaysia. And so again, you know, we've been in many Asian countries for 25, 30 years. Small, and depending on the rules and regulations, different types of operations, largely commercial. And in Malaysia, our branches are commercial. I remember going many, many times to meet the president and the prime minister of Malaysia saying, please give us another branch, please give us another branch. So gradually, we end up with a number of branches. And so we got a very good clientele into the Malaysian business community. Now, we're not very big in the retail, you know, in Islamic banking and whatever, although we're looking at it, but really we're commercial. And so we got our Malaysian management team, which has been with us a long time. We don't have to have many expats in there, maybe for a little bit on technology and whatever. So it's a very success. We would love to do more in Malaysia, and have for 25 years, but it's been one branch at a time. And so that's the background. And each one of our countries in Asia has a similar story. And so we've been able to accelerate South America and Americas quicker for some of those reasons I told you, our backyard, but it was also easier. The regulations, the foreign ownership, and what have you, and you know better than I do, that those issues are still slowly but coming forward. You know, Asia's strong, it's liquid, and it's whatever, and it's harder to get through the regulations and the ownership restrictions, but it's gradually happening, and we'll position ourselves to do that in those right markets.
And there is this acquisition of 20% of Bank of Guangdong.
Right.
Is that part of asset diversification, or is that part of a portfolio diversification, or is that part of strategy to become domestic in China?
It's both. It's both. We've been working on our strategy in China at least for 20 years. We own now, you know, almost 20% of the Bank of Xi'an. I remember going to the IMF meeting in Singapore in the late 90s. That's when we had the handshake, and you know, this is on Xi'an, and we went with the World Bank and the IFC. We got branches in China. We were in Chongqing. Now, and everybody says, you're in Chongqing. We've been in Chongqing for 20 years. And so this was part of a strategy, coupled because Chongqing was near the mining and then whatever, you know, that made sense with the Canadian side. You know, so all that is very, very slow. So the Guangzhou is really a continuation. And of course, because of the crisis and whatever, Guangzhou will be a slightly different, because our partner, which is a little unique, and the same with the Xi'an, is of course the government, or you know, the city of Guangzhou. And that's good. I'm very comfortable with that because this is the city bank, and so we're going to learn from them a little bit about retail banking or with the Chinese customer and how you service the Chinese customer today. And what they are going to learn from us is the things we're good at: risk management, compliance, internal audit. So it's going to be a win-win. Will we end up ever controlling or managing it? I doubt it. But I think we can have a very good partnership. They understand that we have to be profitable. And the way to be profitable is to be efficient and have good risk management. So they're aligned. They know that if they're, you know, so profitability is a good thing because it means it's an efficient and a safe bank.
How do all of these patchy, although it can be somewhat described as patchy by an observer, acquisitions, investments contribute to an overall brand perception, because the further you are from Canada, the more the brand of Scotiabank is an interesting perception. On the one hand, a bank that is very into mining and trading and you know, and those type of activities. On the other hand, very strategic as an investor in specific markets, and on the other hand, also with the China story. So, how do you like to see a foreigner sort of build his brand perception of Scotia?
Well, the brand is only important if it's important to our customers. So if the brand is important, if we're a retail bank in a country, and the Scotia brand is better than the brand that, say, we acquired, would go to Scotia. But if the brand in that country is better, like Thanachart Bank, T-Bank in Thailand, why would we want to change it? Okay, because for our customer base there. Now, for the commercial, the corporate, and the traders, they obviously want also the benefit of an international bank, the safety and whatever. And so we have to go and explain that, and our partners in that to explain that to the corporations, whatever. But they get it, and this is where yourselves and all this communication is. So we don't aspire to be a global corporate brand called Scotiabank. We may, if that's the way it goes. We are now going through a rebranding exercise because the markets, our counterparty on trading is so good that we call our trading operation Scotia Capital. Well, they say, well, what is Scotia Capital? Is that Scotiabank? And it is. So guess what? We're looking very seriously of changing the Scotiabank for that part of the business. So I think it's you're absolutely right, it's very unique. We don't call ourselves a global bank. We don't call ourselves a universal bank. Maybe we're a super regional bank. We have a very unique business model, and guess what? It's been working very, very well.
And how does that all show up at a board meeting? Tell me about the composition of your board. Do you have a board that likes holding its board meetings in far-flung places?
We are taking our board in end of October, we are going to take our whole board to Thailand. And then a part of the board, our executive committee, are going to go to China and celebrate and look at in the city of Guangzhou. And so we try to get our board out.
Globe-trotting board.
Right. No, it's we have a lot because we've been a public bank for 180 years and second year. So it's based here. So the meetings generally tend to be here. But we have a fantastically board, great Canadians. We have a Singaporean on our board. We have a Mexican on our board. We have to get more of that as we go out and what have you. So it's very representative not only of our Canadian thing and our culture, and we got about 6 or 7. All of them have been successful leaders in their field. About 14 people.
What is the outlook for Canada as an economy, given the uncertainties in Europe right now? And I would like to know your take on Europe, because there is an Anglo-Saxon view of what Europe should be, and if you read some newspapers, they are quite determined to make sure that the euro breaks up. And there is the European view of Europe, which is the Eurozone, which is somehow it will hold together, but it will pay a very high price in that sense. But so how does Europe look like from Canada, and how does the U.S.? And I think you've sort of answered the U.S. question, but really more the Euro question.
And I have a sort of unique perspective. I'm also vice chairman of the IIF. I'm on the executive committee. So even though we have very little European exposure, the IIF was involved in Greece and whatever, and I wasn't directly. But as vice chairman, whatever. I'll get into something very fundamental though on this, because it really gets to this crisis and what's going on, and it tied into the debt ceiling in the United States and Europe. This is unlike the earlier crisis. This is a crisis of sovereign debt. So it's not a private sector crisis. Cause of is private sector or banks or whatever. This cause is on a very fundamental rule for a banker who's been around a long time or whatever. Sovereigns were not supposed to default. I promise to pay by a country is a very solemn, a fundamental promise. And then all of a sudden, with the debt ceiling and the technical default in Congress, but more importantly, the default, say, in Greece. So we lived through LDC debt. And so rescheduling is a fact of life. There are times when countries can't pay, but to say, I won't pay, or I promise to pay and I want to tear that up. There's a very fundamental difference between that and rescheduling. The economics are the same as, quote, a technical default, as a rescheduling, but the consequences, both legal, contractual, and I think moral, quite frankly. How can a country say, I won't pay? Countries are sovereign. People don't go away. Now, hard decisions, taxing, cutting back expenses, and what have you. But if we lose that fundamental promise, and I think this is at the heart of what we're seeing here, a lack of trust. When you may not trust a private bank, you may not trust the guy on the street. If you can't trust the countries to honor their promises and their leaders, where do you go?
But you've had this problem before. I mean,
yes, absolutely. LDC debt, lesser development. Okay, yeah. 8 years it took us. Yeah. We had a big exposure. Yeah. Okay, and we did 2 things. We've learned that we try not to lend, and we don't lend to governments because sometimes you have this. But it took 8 years. But they rescheduled. and it was voluntary, and there were lots of options, and a lot of money came to do that, and we have to learn those lessons of the past here because of all the complications.
But Greece isn't saying that they are not.
No, Greece is the leaders of Greece. Yeah, I wish some people would stand up and support the leaders of Greece. Okay, they have a very tough job. I mean, to go to their own people on the street and say, "I'm going to take away your pension." That's a tough thing for a leader to say, or whatever, you know, the various things they're doing. And I think we should give them credit. It's perhaps, I know I got to watch what I say here, is other leaders should support them. And I find that very puzzling from a Canadian perspective.
Rick Waugh, it's really been nice speaking to you, and you know, benefiting from your extensive experience in LDCs and in emerging markets. How often do you travel?
Oh, when don't I travel? Again, I got this thing because, you know, you have to be around. And every time I travel, you know, I like to travel in August. And of course, I think the best secret is let's eliminate August from the calendar, because that's when all the crises are. So I try to travel about 40% of the time. I'm not as successful, but thank God goodness for technology and whatever. It allows me to get a little bit of balance in the schedule.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.